Greetings everyone, hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. In this video I'm going to provide a breakdown of all the feats available in Baldur's Gate 3. There are a lot of options, which gives you quite a bit of flexibility when putting together builds. If you need more information about the skills that are referenced in this video, there's a link in the description to my video walking through all of them. Here at Slandered Gaming we focus on covering RPGs, so if that interests you, please be sure to like this video and subscribe for more content. First on the list is Ability Improvement, which allows you to increase one ability by 2 points or two separate abilities by 1 point. Many builds would have you take this feat first because all classes have a primary ability which impacts how easy it is for you to hit enemies, damage them, and other nice effects. It's useful to pump that score up as high as possible, but there is gear that will let you do this, and some decisions made in the game will increase your ability score as well. For your first playthrough, this is probably a no-brainer, but on subsequent runs, when you know where everything is, you might find your build doesn't need this. Next on the list is Actor. This will increase your charisma by 1 while doubling your proficiency bonus in deception and performance. This can be a solid option if your charisma score is sitting at an odd number and you want proficiency in a couple of other skills. In practice though, if building up your charisma is important to you, most likely you already have proficiency in intimidation or persuasion and you don't really need deception or performance. I would say in most cases this feat isn't worth it. Alert will give you a +5 bonus to initiative and you cannot be surprised. There are very few times in the game where you cannot avoid being surprised, so the second part isn't useful, but the +5 bonus to initiative all but ensures your character will go first. There's a case to be made that it's worth taking this on your entire team, because going first is a big deal. Party members who can crowd control or cut down large groups of enemies at one time can completely change the fight if they go first. For example, this is fantastic on Gale since he can throw out a hypnotic gaze or fireball before most of the enemies have a chance to react. Athlete lets you increase your strength or dexterity by 1, it increases your jump distance by 50%, and if you are prone, standing up requires significantly less movement. You can get knocked prone on a semi-regular basis in the game, but I still don't think that part of this feat is compelling. The jump distance increase is a massive amount and will significantly help you in both combat and exploration. On a high strength character, Athlete makes it very unlikely you will not be able to close the distance with enemies in combat. Obviously, increasing strength or dexterity by 1 will assist you if either of those abilities are odd numbered and important for your build. This is definitely a strong feat to consider. Next on the list is Charger, which will give you the Charger weapon attack and shove abilities. Both of these will cost an action and a bonus action. The advantage is you can charge forward even if you have used all of your movement speed, and this will not provoke attacks of opportunity. As a melee character, mobility is a big deal, and this will make it much easier to reach your enemies. Personally, I am not a fan of this, or frankly Athlete, because you have a team of 4 people. If my melee fighter cannot reach an enemy, then I just let my ranged character take care of it. I am much more focused on my melee party members being effective against whatever enemy is right in front of them. That being said, for your playstyle, this feat might make sense. Next on the list is Crossbow Expert. This allows you to attack with crossbows in melee range without having to take disadvantage on attack rolls. This is irrelevant because you should prevent enemies from getting into melee range by properly positioning your ranged character or putting a Sentinel in front of them. In tabletop, this feat lets you ignore the cost of loading a crossbow, which allows you to retain a bonus action and essentially get off an additional attack. The loading mechanic doesn't exist in BG3, so instead they allow your piercing shot to inflict gaping wounds for twice as long. This is irrelevant because gaping wounds deals 2 additional damage per attack. That's not nearly enough to be worth the feat, so I would skip this. Defensive Duelist is triggered when you are wielding a finesse weapon you are proficient with and lets you use your reaction to add your proficiency bonus to your armor class, potentially causing the attack to miss. At level 4, when you can take your first feat, your proficiency bonus isn't high enough for this to be worth it. At level 12, you can take a third feat, your proficiency bonus will be 4, and this is something to seriously consider. Personally, I wouldn't take it, because my finesse weapon builds center around stealth, so that character would rarely be targeted, but depending on your playstyle, this might be worth it for you. Dual Wielder lets you use 2 melee weapons even if they are not light, and gives you a +1 bonus to AC when fighting in this way. Light weapons do less damage, so dual wielding with other options is advantageous. You could throw this on a rogue and battle with 2 rapiers, or have your fighter cut up enemies with double longswords. It's definitely a good feat to consider. Dungeon Delver gives you advantage on perception checks made to detect hidden objects and on saving throws to avoid or resist traps. You also gain resistance to damage dealt by traps. Everything in this feat regarding traps is irrelevant because you should be detecting traps and walking around them or picking them up, not figuring out how to resist their effects. Advantage on perception checks to detect hidden objects is cool, but I don't think it's worth the feat, so I would skip this. Durable lets you increase your constitution by 1, and you regain full hit points each time you take a short rest. I can count on one hand the number of times this game blocks you from taking a long rest, and only 2 of those instances prevent you from just walking out of the dungeon and resting outside. Therefore, making your short rest more effective is a waste of a feat, and I would skip this. Elemental Adept allows your spells to ignore an enemy's resistance against one type of damage. Also, when you cast spells of that type, you cannot roll a 1 on damage. So for example, without this feat, Fireball could only do 8 damage, but with this feat, at minimum, you will deal 16 damage as long as enemies don't pass their dexterity save. Essentially, this feat raises the floor on how much damage you can do with a spell of a particular element, and all but ensures enemies will have to eat that damage. Keep in mind you will not be able to damage enemies that are completely immune to your element, only those that are resistant. This feat is fantastic if you know you are going to use the same type of spell over and over. Gale sticks with Fireball and Scorching Ray during my runs, so this feat was a no-brainer. Next up, we have Great Weapon Master, which allows you to take a -5 penalty on attack in exchange for a +10 bonus on damage. In addition, when you land a critical hit or kill a target with a melee weapon attack, you can make another melee weapon attack as a bonus action that same turn. This feat is bananas if you know how to manage it properly. At all times, you need to buff your character's ability to attack by giving them advantage on attack rolls. You could do this by ganging up on enemies, casting Fairy Fire, a whole person, or something similar. Early game, you can also use Bless to mitigate the penalty. Barbarians, and to a lesser degree Battle Masters, consistently get advantage on attack rolls, so they can easily make use of this feat. From your action menu, you can add this passive into your hotbar, so it'll be easy for you to turn off when you don't have a way to buff the character. Definitely a feat to strongly consider if you can manage it. Heavily Armored gives you proficiency with heavy armor and allows you to increase your strength by 1. You can only take this if you have proficiency in medium armor. You can gain heavy armor from multi-classing, and I think that's significantly less costly than burning a feat this way, so I wouldn't take this. Heavy Armor Master increases your strength by 1 and reduces the damage you take from non-magical attacks by 3 when you are wearing heavy armor. This might make sense if you are playing on Tactician difficulty and want to create a character whose primary purpose is to soak up damage. Frankly, I don't think that playstyle makes sense in this game since there is no taunt option, so it's hard to ensure that most of the damage will be centered on one character, and I would skip this. Lightly Armored allows you to gain light armor proficiency along with increasing your strength or dexterity by 1. Many spellcasting classes don't come with armor proficiency, so they could use this feat, but I think it would make more sense to just use clothing and mage armor. Therefore, I would skip this. Lucky gives you 3 luck points that allows you to gain advantage on attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws. You can also make an enemy re-roll their attack roll. This is another monster feat. In combat, using luck points is a reaction, so you don't have to know before rolling an attack or saving throw that you will need it. Also, as mentioned, it can give you advantage on ability checks such as persuasion and dialogue or lockpicking. All of this makes Lucky very useful, and this feat is definitely worth considering. Mage Slayer gives you advantage on saving throws against spells cast within melee range of you, and you can use a reaction to immediately make an attack against the caster. Also, enemies you hit have disadvantage on concentration saving throws. This is fantastic against mages, but in Acts 1 and 2, I would argue most spellcasters have very low health, and you don't need all these bells and whistles to take them out. In Act 3, you definitely go up against some spellcasting characters who can take a punch, and maybe this is worth it, but honestly, I would just skip this. The next few feats are all focused on giving you access to spells that usually wouldn't be available in your spellbook. For the most part, I don't think it makes sense to burn a feat in this manner, but some of them are fun to use, so you might decide it makes sense for you. Magic Initiate Bard lets you select 2 cantrips in one spell. The spell can be casted once per long rest and does not use a spell slot. All 3 choices will use Charisma as a spell casting ability. Therefore, this feat makes the most sense for Warlocks, Paladins, and Sorcerers. The Fringe cantrip will provide advantage on Charisma checks, and that's fantastic to have on your main character. Fairy Fire will give your party advantage on all attacks against enemies who are exposed by the spell's light. This is a great way to set up your rogues for sneak attacks or other melee characters who have the Great Weapon Master feat. Healing Word can be cast with only a bonus action, and the spell has a range of 18 meters, so it's a great way to pick up downed characters. Magic Initiate Cleric does the same thing, except the spell list is different and you will use Wisdom as your spell casting ability. This feat can give you the Guidance cantrip, which will produce a 1d4 bonus to all ability checks. The Manergy will give you advantage on performance and intimidation checks. Both of these are fantastic the entire game, and you don't need a great wisdom score to use either one. Healing Word is available here as well. Magic Initiate Druid does the same thing, except the spell list is different, and once again it uses wisdom as its spell casting ability. Therefore, this works best with clerics, rangers, and similar classes. This feat can also give you the Guidance cantrip, along with Fairy Fire and Healing Word, all of which are fantastic. It also has the Shilala cantrip, which makes your staff or club magical, and causes the weapon to scale off your spell casting ability for 10 turns. This is fantastic for monks and non-nature clerics, since you can forego strength and just focus on wisdom to hit enemies as long as you are using a club or staff. It's also worth noting it only costs a bonus action to activate this. Magic Initiate Sorcerer works the same way, except there are different spells and it uses Charisma as a spell casting ability. This feat works best for bards, paladins, and warlocks. Once again, you have access to the Friends cantrip, and you can also get Firebolt, which can ignite surfaces and scales up in damage with your character level. You also have Shield, which is a reaction spell that increases your AC by 5 and makes you immune to magic missile. This is fantastic to have on your melee casters. Magic Initiate Warlock works the same way as Sorcerer, giving access to Friends and Eldritch Blast, which is the most damaging cantrip in the game. It works significantly better if you take 2 levels of Warlock and pick up a couple of invocations, but even without them, it's still great to have. You can also pick up Hex, which will add an extra 1d6 to any damage you do. This is fantastic in the early game, but long term it makes more sense to concentrate on a spell like Haste. Hellish Rebuke is a reaction that allows you to deal 2d10 fire damage on an enemy that attacks you. Really nice to have. Finally, Armor of Agathis provides temporary hit points and deals cold damage to any enemies that hit you with a melee attack. The damage and hit points scale up when you upcast the spell, so it's great to have the entire game. Finally, Magic Initiate Wizard uses Intelligence as your spellcasting ability. This makes it a great choice for Eldritch Knights and Arcane Tricksters. This feat also gives you access to the Shield spell. Next we have Martial Adept, which gives you 1 superiority die and lets you select 2 maneuvers from the Battle Master Fighter subclass that can be activated with the die. For most classes, this is absolutely not worth it, because 1 dice is a paltry amount. You can make the case it's worth it for Battle Masters since they get 4 dice and adding 1 more could be valuable on top of picking up more maneuvers for versatility. Considering all the great melee-oriented feats, I doubt you'll find room for this in your build. Medium Armor Master removes the disadvantage on stealth checks when wearing medium armor, and you can get a +3 bonus to AC from dexterity as opposed to +2. You must have medium armor proficiency to take this. I don't think this feat is worth it because there are multiple sets of armor starting in Act 2 that will remove the stealth penalty. There is the +1 bonus to AC to consider, but I would skip this. Mobile increases your movement speed by 3 meters, which is a 33% increase for most races, and is nothing at all to sneeze at. Difficult terrain won't slow you down when you dash, and if you move after making a melee attack, you don't provoke opportunity attacks from enemies. So obviously this feat makes you significantly more mobile, which is valuable for melee fighters. It gets super crazy if you combine this with Athlete and a character who gets a lot of attacks. You can freely hop around, annihilating several enemies at a time. Sooner or later, I'll do a Juggernaut build that revolves around this combo. Moderately Armored gives you proficiency with medium armor and shields, along with letting you increase strength or dexterity by 1 point. Keep in mind that if you have a shield equipped, you get the AC bonus for it, even if you are using your bow. You must have proficiency in light armor to take this feat. This option is fantastic for rogues and spellcasting classes that don't get these proficiencies. There's also a case to be made that multi-classing into fighter is the better option, since it will provide the same proficiencies at a much lower cost. Performer gives you musical instrument proficiency and lets you increase charisma by 1. Bards automatically get this proficiency, and for other classes, it's not worth taking a feat. Skip this. Polearm Master gives you a bonus attack when using a glaive, halberd, quarterstaff, or spear, allowing you to attack with the butt of the weapon. The damage from the attack is low, but this is still worth it if you have effects which trigger on crits, such as a Paladin Strike. It also can be nice if you have buffs on your base weapon damage, like the Great Weapon Master feat. In addition, this feat lets you make an opportunity attack every time an enemy comes within range. This is fantastic on a melee party member and should trigger every fight. Polearm Master does limit the types of weapons you can effectively use, but it's well worth considering. Resilient allows you to add a +1 bonus to one ability while giving you proficiency in that ability's saving throws. In my opinion, it's only worth taking this feat for Wisdom or Constitution. A lot of really awful crowd control effects target your Wisdom ability, so having proficiency in this area can be nice. If you are consistently concentrating on spells such as Haste or Spirit Guardians, then having proficiency in Constitution saving throws will help ensure you maintain those spells even when damaged. Please note that sorcerers automatically come with proficiency in Constitution saving throws. Ritual Caster will give you 2 ritual spells, which means they do not cost a spell slot to use. I doubt your build can fit this feat, but if it can, there's a case to be made for all of these spells. Speak with the Dead and Speak with Animals will get you more XP and ensure you miss very little content within the game. Find Familiar puts another character out on the field that can distract and attack enemies. Long Strider and Enhanced Leap will allow you to gain more movement in exploration and combat. Disguise Self can be used to speak with the corpses of enemies that you have killed, among other deceptions. You do automatically get a mask that will provide this same magical effect. So none of this is mind-blowing where it's worth taking up a feat, but they are worthy options to have if you want to play around. Savage Attacker lets you roll your melee weapon damage twice and take the higher result. In Tabletop, this feat is kind of trash because it only works 1 time per turn. In BG3, it works every time you deal damage, and more importantly, it works on smites. That means for Paladins, this feat is a flat-out must-have, and more valuable than Great Weapon Master. It's also great if you are using weapons that have a large damage dice, such as great axes, glaives, or halberds. Savage Attacker does not trigger for sneak attacks, but it does trigger for elemental damage directly on your weapon, such as fire from the Everburn blade. Sentinel is triggered when an enemy attacks an ally while they are in melee range of you and provides a reaction that allows you to make a melee attack. The ally cannot also have the Sentinel feat. In addition, you gain advantage on opportunity attacks, and when you hit an enemy with one of those attacks, they cannot move for the rest of their turn. This feat is fantastic on its own, but it matches perfectly with Polearm Master. Enemies run up to you and you'll immediately stop them in their tracks, ensuring they will be within melee range when your turn comes and also helping to protect your back line. This is definitely a strong option to consider. Sharpshooter applies to ranged weapons and removes the -2 penalty to attack when targeting enemies on high ground. You'll also get a passive toggle that increases your damage by +10 while also imposing a -5 penalty to attack, similar to the Great Weapon Master feat. Same rules as before. This is fantastic as long as you are properly buffed to absorb the penalty. It's easier for ranged characters to do this because you can take high ground and automatically give yourself an attack bonus. Keep in mind the bonus damage will apply to your offhand weapons if you are dual wielding crossbows, but so will the attack penalty. Shield Master will give you a +2 increase in dexterity saving throws when wielding a shield. Dexterity saving throws are usually triggered by area of effect spells such as Fireball. When this happens, you can use a reaction, only take half damage on a failed saving throw, or take no damage if you succeed on the saving throw. There are multiple ways to flat out stop enemies from casting a spell, and you should be targeting spellcasters early in the fight to prevent them from bombing on your team. I don't believe this feat is worth it. Skill gives you 3 skill proficiencies. This can help you shore up weak areas on your team, although you might find it easier to just take a level in Rogue, which gives you proficiency in 1 skill and expertise in 2 of them. Spell Sniper allows you to learn another cantrip while also reducing the roll required to get a critical hit with spells by 1. So you could roll both a 19 or 20 to crit, or use an even lower roll if you get this effect from other sources, such as multi-classing into champion. Based on the wording, this should work with all spells, not just cantrips, making it invaluable for spellcasters. Unfortunately, at this time, the feat is bugged and only provides an additional cantrip. Once this is fixed, for most builds, it will probably be a better way to pick up Eldritch Blast than taking Magic Initiate Warlock. Tavern Brawler is triggered when you make an unarmed attack, use an improvised weapon, or throw something, and it causes your strength modifier to be added twice to the damage and attack rolls. It also lets you increase strength or constitution by 1. Obviously, this is a fantastic feat for strength-based monks, but it's absolutely bananas for barbarians who already get damage bonuses when throwing weapons. A frenzied barbarian who has Tavern Brawler and a weapon that automatically comes back when thrown is truly a sight to behold. Tough increases your hit point maximum by 2 for every level you gain. If you wanted to create a pure tank, this is a great way to do it, but again, I don't think it's a wise investment of your limited feats. Next on the list is Warcaster, which gives you advantage on saving throws to maintain concentration on a spell. I think Resilient is a better option than this, because you can get proficiency on all Constitution saving throws and potentially increase your HP. On average, having advantage on a dice roll increases the roll by 3, so in most situations, adding your proficiency bonus to the roll is an equal or superior option. You can also use your reaction to cast Shocking Grasp at a target moving out of melee range. This is great for casters who can operate in melee range but don't deal strong melee damage, such as clerics for example. Overall, I would say skip this feat. Last on the list is Weapon Master, which gives you proficiency in 4 weapons while also allowing you to increase strength or dexterity by 1. Obviously, this is an option if there's one particular weapon you really want to use, but even in those situations, multi-classing into something that gives you that proficiency is a much less costly alternative. That completes my overview of all the feats in Baldur's Gate 3. Looking forward to hearing your feedback in the comments below. Hope all of you enjoyed this video. Take care!